Rainbow Reflections, Book 1, A Kind of Magic, Chapter 24, Reprise. Snow drifted from the dark blue and gray sky, twirling down peacefully to an icy pond. The frozen water gleamed in the moonlight peeking through the clouds, causing the wintry terrain to feel more tranquil. A light breeze swirled through, pushing snowflakes across the ice and off the pine trees before falling still. Ak-tu breathed deeply, the frigid air piercing his lungs. He released his breath in a puff of fog, his stiff body relaxing a little. Violet eyes scanning the trees and pond in front of him, he bounced up and down on the balls of his feet to keep his body warm while he waited in the forest. Any day now, he thought, wishing he had brought a metal bottle of hot cocoa. The trees rustled as another light breeze swept through, causing Ak-tu to shiver and pull his fuzzy hat further down his head. Cold and bored, Ak-tu began practicing martial arts, starting with swinging punches to keep his blood flowing and tingling through his fingertips. He wasn't striking the air for too long when he saw a shadowy figure on the other side of the pond. Finally! Ak-tu uttered under his breath, smiling as he recognized the broad-shouldered man. He got out of his low stance and ran forward, his crunchy footsteps loud as he kicked up snow behind him. Once he reached the pond, Ak-tu hopped onto the ice, using a combination of water and air magic to propel him across. The water magic allowed his feet to glide on the ice without slipping, while the air magic made him move rapidly.
Yo!
Jabali's voice rang out as the man stepped foot onto the ice as well, nearly slipping right away. Stay there, Ak-tu called, trying to hold back a snort of amusement. Don't fall! He thrust his palms behind him, creating more wind to jet him across the pond. Wind whizzing through his hair and stinging his eyes, Ak-tu could barely see Jabali and didn't realize how fast he was approaching. He lowered his arms to stop the magic, but it was too late. Ak-tu crashed into Jabali, throwing them both to the ice with yelps of surprise. Dizzy and the air knocked from his lungs, Ak-tu found himself sprawled on top of Jabali, who groaned beneath him in a daze.
You crazy dunderhead!
Jabali huffed, shoving Ak-tu off.
What are you doing? Trying to break the ice and have us go for a midnight swim?
Ak-tu groaned, feeling a bruise already forming on his side as he propped himself up to his knees. Sorry, I didn't realize I was going so fast, he uttered earnestly, clutching his side. Jabali raised his eyes to the sky in exasperation, then got to his feet. He brushed snow from his tangled hair and off his blue robe, then examined the top pocket. Frowning, he pulled out a crushed white and indigo plant.
Look what you did to my moonshadow flower,
Jabali complained. Ak-tu felt guilt course through him at once. I'm sorry, he murmured, dipping his head to the ice. I didn't mean to crash into you like that. Jabali eyed him for a moment, then tossed the flower over his shoulder.
Yeah, whatever. I've got more at home. Just thought I'd bring some decor with me to celebrate the day of the moon tonight.
Ak-tu glanced up at him to see Jabali offering him a small smile. Beaming, Ak-tu sprang to his feet at once, only to slip on the ice. Jabali quickly grabbed hold of his arm and held him up.
Clearly someone wants to go ice skating,
chuckled Jabali. I mean... Before Ak-tu could finish speaking, Jabali slid away, tugging the smaller man after him. Ak-tu let out a bewildered cry, which quickly turned into laughter that echoed through the still air. He used his water magic once again, allowing them both to glide more easily. Jabali shifted his weight from one side to the other, Ak-tu following his lead as he pressed himself closer to the ice. The two men crisscrossed the pond in circular motions, twirling like the snowflakes dancing down from the sky. The clouds shifted aside, moonlight illuminating them as they made their way, back and forth and side to side, looping here and spinning there. Though the wind was frosty as it swirled across them, Ak-tu could only feel a warmth spreading from his chest to his fingertips and toes. Eventually, they slowed to a stop at the other side of the pond, where Ak-tu had begun. Jabali nearly stumbled, and it was Ak-tu's turn to grab hold of him with both hands to keep him up. Clearly somebody wanted to dance, Ak-tu mocked Jabali.
Hey, you know I like dancing the night away.
Jabali chuckled, waving his arms about and nearly throwing Ak-tu over his shoulder. Ak-tu released his grip before he could be tossed, his grin broadening. Yeah.
So, now that we've had our fun,
Jabali huffed as he sat down on the ice.
was there any reason you wanted to meet up?
The day of the moon, Ak-tu said promptly, sitting down across from him.
Yeah, and what else?
Why do you always think there's something else?
Has there been anything more going on with that mirror shard? Or any spirits?
Ak-tu shook his head.
No more visions for Ren?
Nope.
And no magic for Zin?
Not since you started the potion,
Aha!
Jabali declared, pointing a large finger at Ak-tu.
So there is something new.
Oh, yeah. Zin's trying out identifying as a boy now, Ak-tu said, running his fingers over his mustache.
How's that going?
He just told us tonight, Ak-tu said with a shrug. I'm glad he's trying things and getting it figured out.
And how about ya? You getting things figured out?
Ak-tu blinked in confusion. Figured out? About what? He wondered. The gender stuff? Never figured that out and don't care at this point. Or is he asking about...
Have you figured out what to do at the school?
Jabali clarified as he saw Ak-tu's blank face. Ak-tu raised one side of his unibrow. It sounds like he's picking up from a conversation we left off at, but... What are you talking about? He asked aloud. Jabali brushed his curly hair out of his eyes and said,
Now that Zin can't do magic till next year, that means you gotta have the school longer. Don't you want to get back to traveling?
We've already been over this, Ak-tu uttered, flicking his fingers to create a small twirl of wind floating in front of him. I'm content with the school. We'll travel after.
After what?
After my kids are done with school, Ak-tu said, his eyes glazing over. It's just a few years.
But what about after? They gonna go to university?
I'm not sure. It's up to them, Ak-tu replied.
So you're gonna be traveling alone?
Ak-tu sighed lightly, the spiraling wind vanishing as he let his hand drop to his side. Well, maybe. I'm sure we'll have one more big trip before they go to universities. If they do. Again, I'm not sure what either kid wants to do, as I don't think they know themselves just yet.
Yeah, good point,
Jabali uttered.
Most people that age don't know what to try out.
Anyhow, that's years from now, Ak-tu went on, shifting into a more comfortable position as the ice was hurting his tailbone. I try to live in the present moment. The future is too uncertain, and so many things could change. Before Jabali could respond, a loud cry split the air, a chill trickling down Ak-tu's spine like freezing water. He and Jabali hopped to their feet, struggling to maintain their balance.
There!
Jabali yelled, pointing at the trees to their left. Ak-tu squinted, catching sight of a small shadow darting through the snow-covered bushes. The creature shrieked again, a high-pitched yet short noise that almost sounded like a bird.
What is that?
Jabali grumbled. Let's find out, Ak-tu murmured. Without warning, he hopped off the ice and returned to the snow, landing with a soft crunch up to his knees. The cold crystal soaked through his pants and immediately froze his legs, but he paid no attention to this as he pulled his feet free and sprinted after the shadow. He could hear Jabali's heavy footsteps behind him and hear his light huffs as he tried to catch up. The figure was now skittering between bushes, its long tail flicking snow off branches and not allowing Ak-tu to make out its features. At one point, the shadow even pulled a twig back, then released it, throwing snow at Ak-tu and blinding him momentarily. Staggering after it, Ak-tu knew this was no animal they were dealing with. I think they're a spirit, Ak-tu called telepathically, not wanting to alert the creature. It might be the spirit who's been reaching out to Ren, or the one who got into the school. We have to catch them. Jabali did not respond, having never mastered telepathy. Ak-tu forced his legs to keep pushing him across the snow and through the plants, glad that he had only been sitting for a few minutes. Ducking beneath a low-hanging branch and dodging around a hopping bush, he managed to catch up relatively quickly to the spirit. Gotcha now, Ak-tu thought, springing off his toes with a burst of wind as he threw himself at the creature. But it vanished. His hands clutched empty air, and his momentum carried him right into a tree. Wincing as he slammed into the rough bark, he swiftly lifted his hands to prevent the tree's snow from dropping all over him. Successful, he staggered to his feet in a daze and stumbled backwards, keeping his arms up until he determined he was far enough away from the floating heap of snow. He then lowered his arms, the snow plopping down with a crunchy thud. Jabali skidded to a stop beside him, throwing snow in all directions that Ak-tu might as well have allowed the frozen stuff to fall on his head. Rolling his eyes as he wiped the snow off him, he continued speaking to Jabali by mind.
Did you see that spirit pop out anywhere?
No,
Jabali murmured in a low voice.
I thought it went invisible.
If they had turned invisible, I would have been able to grab them still. No, they teleported away somewhere.
Ak-tu shook his head in disappointment.
We better keep looking for them.
Jabali grunted lightly beside him. Ak-tu led the way through the forest, the pond now far out of sight as the trees thickened. This region was much darker, since it was harder for the moon's light to pierce through the undergrowth, especially as clouds continuously passed by. They kept their ears pricked for any footsteps padding across the snow. Ak-tu kept his fingers and wrist flitting about, trying to feel movement in the still air. Jabali kept his head turning about, scanning for any spirit magic in use. The men had been walking for almost half an hour, yet nothing seemed to exist in the snowy forest. Eventually, Ak-tu came to a stop in his tracks, sitting down abruptly in a lotus position next to a bush.
I think the spirit is gone, but I'll try to reach out with my energy,
he told Jabali, closing his eyes. Ak-tu took a deep breath, then released it to relax his sore body. He imagined crawling through the bushes and floating through the tallest trees, covering the length of the forest like a giant blanket. Yet all he could detect were low buzzes, the tiniest sparks of energy coming from animals or plants. The biggest presence he could feel was Jabali standing beside him like a guard. The spirit had truly gone. Ak-tu opened his eyes and looked up at his friend, shaking his head.
They're gone,
he said aloud.
Well, that was bound to happen,
Jabali murmured, holding a large hand out to Ak-tu. Ak-tu grabbed the calloused hand, allowing Jabali to tug him to his feet as his energy seeped away like snowflakes in a breeze.
Did you recognize the sound that spirit made?
I don't think so. Did you see any spirit magic?
Nope.
Then we're no closer to figuring anything out, Ak-tu uttered with a sigh, his shoulders slumping.
We'll get there, don't you worry,
Jabali encouraged, slapping Ak-tu hard on the back and knocking him back to the snow.
Whoops.
Helping him up again, Jabali added,
We now know there's definitely a spirit trailing you around, right?
But are they?
Ak-tu wondered, running his fingers over his mustache.
What if they're the one reaching out to Ren?
Then I guess they're reaching out to you both,
Jabali said with a shrug.
Do you think they're trying to warn us of something? Or guide us?
Jabali raised his eyes to the sky.
Always optimistic about them spirits, aren't you? I think it's more likely that spirit is a threat.
Ak-tu frowned.
Maybe. But maybe they've just been trying to get in contact with me, and I've been too busy to notice. So then they tried reaching out to Ren, and then they saw me out here, and...
Please, Ak-tu, keep your guard up,
Jabali growled, grabbing Ak-tu by the shoulders and shaking him a few times.
I don't trust that spirit to be good or even neutral. I think some spirit is after you, maybe your whole family.
The hair prickled on the back of Ak-tu's neck, his eyes widening and a lump forming in his throat. He gazed up at his friend, not knowing what to say for a long moment. Finally, he swallowed the lump away and murmured,
I will be upping the security at the school, and looking for more mirror shards myself. I'll try to figure out what's going on, why the spirit's hanging around, how they might have gotten in.
Jabali nodded curtly, releasing his hold on Ak-tu.
Good. And call me with any updates, you hear? I'll be with you in an instant to check out anything that might be going on, okay?
Nodding wordlessly, Ak-tu stepped forward and hugged his friend.
Thank you, Jabali, he whispered. You've been too helpful.
Hey, I don't want anything to happen to your family,
Jabali said seriously.
and I don't want anything to happen to you. You hear?
Loud and clear,
Ak-tu said, pulling away from him.
Anyhow, I'd better get back to the school. Are you fine going home alone, or would you like to stay?
Gotta get back to my shop.
Jabali replied, pulling out his mirror.
It's late, and I gotta be there soon enough. But call me if anything changes.
I will, Ak-tu promised. You'll be the first to know.
Jabali nodded curtly, hugged Ak-tu one more time, then left without another word. Ak-tu watched him go until he vanished into the shadows. After his friend had gone, he pulled his own mirror out of his pocket, glad to see it hadn't broken with all the action it had been through. He opened the map app, blinking in surprise that he was closer to the school than he'd thought. Once he ensured he was going in the right direction, he pocketed the object again and started walking.
My kids might be in danger. I have to get this puzzle figured out. Who is the spirit, and what do they want with us?